Okay, new camera and new game, 18 MEX. Clearly time for... This one's by Mark Derrick. I think he's the guy who did the GA and AL ones, which should be sort of a warning, but because they're very much derivative of 1830, but a little lighter weight, like they're not quite as harsh. And this one shows some of those signs. However, this had some interesting things in it that led me to say, hey, let's give it a try. Now, new camera, what happened? Well, interesting stuff. I bought it, I think this is a little older than my last one. I'm having the same issue with the memory card, which is that it's not recording on the memory card. It's not recognizing it to record. I can't find any way to make the camera recognize it. This one also has some additional problems. The screen touch isn't working, which I'm fine with because the little buttons work, but it's what I get, you know, for being stuck wanting these older cameras. They're much better for me. They're lightweight. This one might eat energy a little less. I don't know, and maybe with the screen shut off, it will work fine. So anyway, I even tried a different memory card on it. Which is something I intended to do with the other one. It doesn't seem to make a damn bit of difference. So maybe there's something that's going wrong. The computer recognizes the file system. Anyway, to the game. This is definitely in the 1830 lineage. You can kind of see here the yellow means what it does there. I was actually thinking about not, doing a full intro video and just, banging out the differences. But there's two things. One is this wouldn't make a terrible starter game of 18XX for a player. It is in the 1830 flavor, like the AL and GAR, and although it does add a few interesting things, it's got a national railway, the National Railway of Mexico, which it's got miners which run into it. So it's got some of that 1835 feel to it. I don't know how it's going to play. It looks like it's going to be a little cutthroat, but not as bad. One of the reasons, as 1830, or as good, one of the reasons being that the private companies can't be sold for, they can only be sold for 1.5 times their price, which means they won't be a massive hit. So I'll try to cover some of the general stuff of an 18XX game, but honestly, if you want to learn the basics of the game, take a look at 1830, my video on that, or someone else's video. There's probably other people who've done 18 MEX. But some of the common concepts behind it are, you are an investor who has cash, and I'll be using chips for that. The bank is $9,000 in size, which means I have to hide some stuff over near Gloomhaven. I use these as 500s. They're not in the bank. That is $9,000. So you're playing an investor who can purchase shares in the various corporations, and you might also own privates or these minor companies. Now, the minor companies in this are a little different than the ones in other games like 35. They come with a base 2 train on them, which... yeah, it is the same train. I was wondering if it would be the same picture, and then I looked here, and it's not. Okay. They come with a base 2 train on them that they always have, and they'll disappear at some point in the game. There are also private companies which provide you with a base income. The private companies can be sold to major corporations. The person who owns the presidency of a corporation makes all the decisions for that. And that person is the person with the most shares of stock in it. If multiple people have the same number of shares of stock, the presidency sits with whoever it was with. And if multiple people own the same number of shares of stock, but none of them were the last president, i.e. the president maybe sold some shares or whatever, or somebody bought over him. Well, if the president sold some shares, is the only way it can happen. It goes next in order on the table. And like many of the 18xx games, almost all of them, the player seating order is going to determine the order of play continuously throughout the game. But who goes first in particular cases for stock dealings is handled with a priority deal card. And who goes first for the operating rounds of their corporations, well, the corporations operate based on their stock value, for what that's worth. A major company is not the player's personal domain. Neither, for that matter, are the miners. They each have their own treasuries, so you're going to be keeping money on those placards that is separate from your own money, as much as the bank is separate from your own money, even though you have the capability to manage and maybe to steal some of it. Okay. That's some of the basic ideas here. You're going to be laying track. Track can never be modified or mutated in any way. Different terrain, some of it has a cost to it. Now there's some interesting stuff here. First of all, these are for the miners. I've just put them out on the board to help me find them. We've got these weird 2-hex track lays. Those go into the Mexico City space. They upgrade together, which is kind of interesting. There's a number of named cities that are special cases. And this is going to be kind of painful. You got to kind of remember where they are. Some of the games give you a nice bold indication of where there's special track to be laid. But here, you just have to remember what those towns are. And that gets perhaps more difficult as you go later. So like this La Mochis here has this piece. Okay, now La Mochis I don't think had one of these, which is rather odd, if you ask me. The other special pieces are ports, and they have a dead end on them, which is represented on the board, so that'll help you find some of those. Like Tampico here has a dead end space on it, but Veracruz does not to begin with. So that's a little odd. I'm not quite sure what the deal is there. It's been a while since I read the rules, because I read these rules while I was playing Espinosa, and that ended up taking way longer than it should have, as everything does these days, especially war games, but for me. Mainly because my addiction eats up the majority of my time, more so than work did. Okay. So, minor companies, like in other games that have minor companies in them, like 1835, like 2038, basically you run them, whatever income they derive, half of it goes to the player, half of it goes to the minor company treasury. The major corporations, when you run and make income with them, for the most part, the income is going to be divided amongst the shareholders. But there is something special in this. There are mail runs. I don't know. I know that mail runs show up in another game or three. They're not all that common. What they are is a means of just collecting some cash directly into the company treasury. The player can't intervene with that and take any of that. As an alternative, so when you make your normal run, though, you collect money and you give it, you pay it out in shares. Each stock share has an indication of the percentage of the company that it's worth, and that is also how many, what percentage of that revenue you get. So you pay out all your revenue. You have no options in this game. It's like 1830. Or you pay out none of it and take it into your corporate treasury, which does have another source of income. And it has another one just like in 1830, which is the open market as well. Provides a means of collecting some cash. There's the concept of the bank. The bank is this, but it's also all the trains and all the stock certificates that players don't own. Okay? So when you buy something from the bank, you pay it into there. It includes stuff in the open market. It includes the new train purchases and everything. So almost all of your financial dealings are going to be between the bank and a player, either buying shares from the initial offering or the open market, or buying trains for their corporations. What else do we have here? We have a couple of other little handy things. So this is to remind you of par values. When you release this, when you start a new corporation, you, as the president, as the new president, you set the par value of that stock. I better swap batteries, but you set the par value of that stock, and then you trying to see how much time I have on this camera. Again, I'm using the internal instead of my 64 gigabit card or whatever. You use the you set the par value. You pay, because all the president's shares are 20% instead of 10%. You pay twice that value, and you get the president's certificate. And then anyone else who wants to buy from the initial offering is going to pay that 10% value. Now, when you buy shares in this game, the money just goes to the bank. But once the company floats, which I think is 60%, but I'll have to look that up. When the company floats, it gets 10 times the value of its par value, which basically means it's fully capitalized using loans and whatnot. Now, on the bad side of that, like in 1830, any shares sitting in here don't pay. If you pay dividends out, the money goes back to the bank, so you don't have to worry about it. Also, like in 1830, if there's shares in the open market, those do pay to the company treasury, which I've always felt is ass backwards. Like, some of the Winsome games get it righter. They say you pick your dividends amount, you pay that out, and it's split among the shareholders, and that may influence stock price and everything. Shares that are in the initial offering but not yet purchased, nobody owns them, but if anybody did, it would be sort of the corporation. It hasn't released them yet. That works well in partial cap games maybe. But the open market is, other people holding them. There's no way the corporation would get that money back. 1870 handles it right. It allows the corporation to buy back shares out of the open market or even off of people when they're selling them, and maintain them as part of its stock holding, which isn't exactly correct either, but it makes more sense. Okay. So I'm babbling a whole lot about not much of anything. The other thing that's kind of useful, you've got an extra marker you've got one for the par. You've got some of these markers are going to be used as station markers, which is a common idea. We'll describe that, I guess, a little bit. But you've got an extra marker to indicate how much your last run made. This can be helpful for people to assess what's going on, and also to understand, what your run probably should be the next time. Although major changes like train changes, tracks being cut, stuff like that can change the value of this of your run significantly. All right, I'm going to swap batteries. One kind of nice thing about my camera situation, I hate that I had to order another camera, but is that now I have, once again, something I used to have, which is multiple chargers. I have, my old cameras operating as a charger. Some of my other old cameras did that in the past, but then eventually they get so broken that they can't even charge the batteries anymore. And that's kind of where I am with all of them now. Okay. So what are we at here? At the beginning of the game, everybody's going to get a handful of cash. Now, that's spelled out somewhere here, and I'll need to find that. A bunch of charts here, and I don't see it here. I don't see it here either. Here it is. Okay, so the game only holds 5 people, so I'm going to be giving everybody. I like to play with the full complement when possible. Everybody's going to get $450, and I'm going to set up 5 different players, and I'll be operating counterclockwise instead of clockwise, just because I'm weird that way, right? Okay. The first player, who will be this top guy at the left, will get the priority deal, and he has the first option to buy things. Now, at the beginning of the game, just like in 1830, you're only going to be allowed to buy in the first stock round and any others that are similar. You're only going to be allowed to buy this initial offering. All the shares are not available yet. Now, the initial offering comes with a base price assigned to it, and the miners have their base price in a slightly different location, and an income, which it'll make every operating round until it disappears. A couple of these come with additional shares of stock. The Chihuahua and the National Railways. Which percentage is that? That's the presidency. Holy shit. Okay. Yeah. Each of these come with, yeah. All right. And the bidding works very much like it does in 1830. The first player has the option to either buy this private company for its face value, or bid on any of the other ones that come later in the order, at least $5 more. You can bid $6 more if you want. There might be reasons for that. I don't know why, because you have multiples of 5, but and these are all multiples of 5, so it's not quite as, there's probably less reason than there is in 1830. Like, there's weird reasons that you might want to bid weird amounts in 1830, because they're like the maximum that you can get away with, and kind of skew anybody else's plans if they buy it, perhaps. Okay, and so what happens is the first player has the option to either buy this or put a bid on one of these others. If he puts a bid on one of the others, let's say, let's say I bid 55 on this. I would put that money aside, and I would somehow mark, perhaps using company tokens or something else, that I'm the person who's bid on that railway. You only need to do that once. You're locked in on the bid, but there are some weird reasons you might want to throw a bid in, a second bid on the same company. It's not explicitly disallowed in here, although they say it's useless. It's not always useless, but just take my word on that, because I'm not going to know enough about this particular game to know that I want to bid higher on a particular company. It's a very rare case. So eventually, someone will buy this, right? Or not. If everybody passes and everybody's done putting their bids down, their money's all accounted for, and nobody bought this, the price of this goes down one, and the person with priority is offered, goes down by $5, and the person with priority is offered it $5 less. That could keep happening. Maybe nobody wants it for some crazy reason. If that's the case, eventually it'll hit $0, and the person with priority is forced to take it. It takes their stock action, so the next person would get the next action. Now, chances are everything else is bid on if you're in some kind of weird situation like that, but for all the... so if this is bought, and there's no bids on this, now this one's being offered at face value to the next player in line. If, however, there's a bid on this one, if there's only one bid, the person gets the private for the bid that they paid, that they offered. If there's multiple people on it, they enter a new auction round, and I believe it's the lowest bid gets the next bid or something like that. Usually it's only 2 people bidding on something, so it is that. I'd have to look up if it's something weird there. I could see how it's worded. The participating players take turns clockwise, beginning with the player after the one who made the highest bid. Yeah, so no, it's not the lowest bid. It's the person normally to the left of the person who made the highest bid. It would be to the right in my case. Okay. And then there's that discount on the first company if it keeps going. Now, only this company has that special rule. And the reason for that is, once any companies have been bought and owned, and until this one's bought, nothing happens. If everybody passes on, say, this next company, then this guy gets his operating round and his $5. So he'll eventually win the game by draining the entire bank if everybody absolutely refuses to buy this. Okay. Now, once all the privates and minors have been bought, you enter the normal stock purchasing circumstance, and there you have multiple options. Okay. On the first stock round of the game, you will not be allowed to sell any certificates whatsoever. You cannot sell any shares of a company whose presidency hasn't been bought yet, because it's got no par value and therefore it's worthless, and you're just not allowed to. You can't even throw it away for zero if you so desired. And those are up here, right? I think. Maybe not, because the Mexican National, what is this? The Chihuahua. Huh. Does that have a special share listed? It doesn't have anything special. So that one I'll pull out, because someone will get that with their bid. And now I'm making a mess. All right. Then you are allowed to sell as many of your shares that you like within certain restrictions, and buy up to one certificate from either the initial offering or the open market. If you buy from the initial offering, if it's the president's share, you set the initial price and pay twice that value. You get the president's certificate worth 20%, and you pay twice as much. If you're buying a later certificate from the initial offering, you simply pay the par value, put it in the bank, take your certificate, and you're good. That's the end of your stock round. Well, you can sell other things. If you buy from the open market, though, you'll be operating off the price up here, which is the price that's impacted by the company operating and people manipulating the stock values and all that. All right. You're not allowed to sell enough shares that would ever put a company at more than 50% in the open market. You're not allowed to sell the president's certificate unless someone else has at least 20% of the company that you can exchange the presidency for. So if no one has 20% of your company, you're stuck as president of it. You are allowed to sell half of a president's certificate by exchanging for 10%, for 10% share. Well, for 20% of the company in smaller shares, because there are 5% shares in this game, not a lot. And then selling just 10% of it. The NDM, yes. So the national, I think that's this one. Yeah. The National Railway of Mexico. That's the one with 5% shares. If you want, you can sell 5% of a 10% share of that, assuming that either one person holds both the 5% shares, or you can only use it in the open market to make a change. Sorry. So if somebody owns two 5% shares, you're shit out of luck. You got to either sell your 10% or nothing. Okay. Which is fair, because it could limit someone. You are allowed to sell shares of something that has not yet floated or operated. Every time you sell, every 10% share drops the price by one row. Now, you're allowed to sell all your shares at once at the current price, and then it impacts all those prices. Does this actually limit your order? hold on, maybe. Okay, so it doesn't specify order here. But it is ordered. I think you're allowed to do it in either order, but it's not clear. Okay, you're allowed to sell private companies directly to another player for any positive number of dollars. This almost never happens, but there might be some kind of magical reason that something is worth paying someone, you know, that one of these, that two players can come to an agreement. This is done during either your own or the other involved player's stock turn. But if the person buys it during their stock turn, that is their stock purchase, which is kind of a weird little pain in the butt. Okay. Yeah. All right. There is a limit to how many certificates you can hold. In general, that's based on the number of players. However, if no corporation ends up merging into the NDM at the start of Phase 5, that certificate limit increases because there are going to be more corporations available in the game as a whole. There's specific limits. You can't own more than 60% of the stock in a major company. You might end up somehow with 70% of the UDY as a result of receiving its trade-in share. If this happens, you can keep the excess until the next stock turn, but at that point you must fix the problem. Your total number of certificates must not exceed your certificate limit, and I believe everything counts. 5% certificates of the NDM do not count against this limit. Whoa. 20% counts as only one. 5% certificates do not count. Stock of companies whose market values are in the yellow section also do not count. And private company certificates owned by a major do not count either. But privates and minors do count. Yeah. If there's no NDM merger, yeah, we talked about that. No player may... Okay, if you're already holding a maximum number of certificates allowed by this limit, you cannot purchase another certificate except a 5% certificate of the NDM or stock of a company whose marker's in the yellow that doesn't count. Even if the purchase would change the presidency and allow you then to hold more. So you're going to have to, you know, engineer a means of swapping shares around in order to get that to work. However, it is possible that you might lose a presidency and now have too many certificates, or something else might happen that causes this kind of situation. If that's the case, during your next stock turn, the next chance that you have to legally sell or buy stock, you must divest and get yourself down to size. I have to swap batteries again. This thing seems like it's eating them. So every time, this happened with one of my very old ones, so I think this one may be older. Every time I turn it off, I've got to resume. Really annoying. Okay. A company floats when 50% of its shares have been sold out of the initial offering. These guys count as being in the initial offering for that matter. When a major company floats, the bank gives the players the charter, 10 times the par value of the stock, and all the tokens that it's due. 1, 2. Feels like there's an extra token. Oh, no. Okay, so there's three special tokens are used. One in each of these. One on the stock market, one on the par value, and one on the income. Yeah. I was looking at this and I'm like, only 2? There's so many. Jeez. Yeah, there's a lot more than I'm used to seeing there. Okay. Whenever a purchase of or sale of stock makes it so that someone else has more shares than the current president, the president has to turn in his certificate for an equal amount of shares, and now there's a new president to the company. This can be a good or a bad thing. Okay. Stock rounds, both the initial and others, continue until everybody passes in order. The first person who passed in that consecutive order, after somebody did something, gets the priority deal for the next turn. Pretty standard stuff in an 18XX. Okay. Operating rounds. First thing is the privates operate. They operate by paying out their income to whatever owns them. If that's a player, it goes directly to the player. If it's a corporation, it goes into the corporate treasury. Then the three minor companies operate, A, B, and C, in that order. Then all major companies which have floated take their operating turns. This is going to be based on the price on the stock market. The higher the price, the earlier you operate in the order. The first person who gets into a space has precedence over everyone else, and so on down the line. So the last person in is the last one in that space. And we use these little tokens and flip them over when a company's operating. So operating a private, I've already talked about that. Special ability of the KCM&O cannot be used during its own turn. It's used during the corporation's turn. They call them major companies. I prefer corporation. It sounds a little bit more different. Operating a minor. Okay. For minor companies, they operate sort of like a major corporation. If it's a minor company's first operating turn, it gets station token on the city for free. It gets to lay one yellow tile and pay any costs for laying a tile in that terrain. So if there's a cost on the terrain, you have to pay that. Only for the yellow tile. Then it's allowed to operate its built-in two-train, and it must do that. And it collects whatever revenue it takes, gives half of it to its owner, and puts half of it in its treasury. For major companies, on the first one, they get their station token on their home city, which are marked on the map, for free. And you'll see here it says free. Then they collect mail contract revenue. Okay. The way this works is they get an amount of revenue equal to the revenue value of the company's original home city. This payment is separate from any revenue the train runs. It goes directly into the treasury. I think that's upgradable. So if you're here, it's 30 and goes up to 50. These others, it's based on, what the track is laid as. Then you're allowed to lay one or two yellow tiles or upgrade one tile. Okay. The rules of laying tiles are really kind of simple. You have to be able to trace back to a token, following contiguous lines, etc. You pay money if you have to. But upgrading track is a little different. You have to, it's the same as any XX. You have to maintain all the connections currently on the track, on the track that you're replacing. Then you're allowed to place a station marker. The cost of station markers is 40 for the first one, 60 for the next, and then 80 for any additional ones. Then you're allowed to purchase private companies directly from players. This is, I believe, anywhere from 50%. Okay, once a3-train's been purchased, the majors can buy privates. The price is subject to negotiation between the player and the major company's president, but it has to be between 50% and 1.5 times the face value of the company. In 1830, and in most 18XXs, you're allowed to basically set the price anywhere up to anywhere between $1 and twice the face value of it. This is a massive hit in 1830. Here, the prices, I don't think the Mexican National can be sold anyway. So here, the biggest hit is probably this thing at 150. In 1830, there's the Camden and Amboy, which can go for 320. That can be a massive hit on a corporation, and can be part of handing off a burned out wreck to someone. Oh, I skipped one. I skipped a couple of things here. Okay. So you place your station token. You don't purchase the private company yet, although that can be done, I think, anywhere, anytime during the turn. Okay. You run your trains. So running trains is basically going to be using this number here to connect that number of major cities. I believe in this game, and I'll check it, these little doinkers, which are worth $10 each when track runs through them, don't count at all. You're able to run through them for free. That's odd. Quite often, they're a real pain in the ass in the game. But in this one, they're just a bonus, so you want to run through all the little towns. So a 2-train could connect 2 major towns. A 3-train could connect 3 of them and any blinkers between them. We'll take a peek at, let's see how that's worded. 4.42. Okay. Total number of cities must be equal to or less than the number train value. Yeah, so you're allowed to run through additional towns beyond your normal run. And that's important because the port towns here add an extra $10 if you run to them. So that's kind of interesting. Okay. And they don't cost you anything in terms of train capacity. Now, we do have some big diesel trains here which run a little bit differently, and we'll take a look at them as well. I don't know where that's going to be listed. I think they double, but they only double the value of the big cities you run through. So if you run through a bunch of towns, you just get to count them once, and the big cities count double. Okay. All right. After you run your train, you have the choice of either paying out the dividends or withholding them. If you withhold them, they just go into your company treasury. If you pay them out, they're divided by 10, and basically each 10% share gets that amount. 5% shares will get half that amount. Rounded up, I think. I don't remember. I think it's always rounded in favor of the player. So like if you sell something, I don't remember. Okay. What else do we have here? Remove from play all obsolete trains that it owns. Yeah. So this game has a delayed obsolescence for some trains. Some trains just rust. Okay? So when the 4s come out, the 2s disappear immediately. They're gone. But some trains will become obsolete. Okay, maybe I'm wrong. I'll have to look that up. Let's see. 4.3.4.1. In most Okay. In most instances, when a phase change causes trains of a certain type to be removed from play, it does immediately. But the 4 trains are an exception. When the second 6 train is purchased, those 4 trains which are in the open market are removed from play immediately. All 4 trains owned by companies are turned upside down and are considered obsolete. They will get one more run. This is kind of a real, like, saving grace for these companies. Quite often, those larger trains going obsolete is a heavy blow to a company. In this one, you might be running a couple of those trains and be able to do one big swallow beforehand. So it's kind of an interesting idea. Like I said, I think this is a softer version of that sort of 1830 style of play. In a lot of ways it's 1830, but it's got some softening aspects to it, just like AL and GA did in a lot of ways. But this one has this one has minors and mergers and stuff like that. So I decided to give it a try. You know, when I look at an 18XX that's for sale, I look to see what neat things does it have and what do people say about it. The problem with what do people say about it is some people really like it to be like less harsh, whereas I really like the harsher economic versions of the game. Okay. Now, at this point, you're allowed to buy one or more trains. I thought it's only one per turn in this one. It says one or more from the bank. Huh. I wonder where I'm reading that, where I'm remembering that from being wrong. Yeah. No. There is also a limit. In the first part of the game, each major company is limited to buying at most one train from the bank each turn. This limit disappears when the first 4 train is purchased. So one of the habits in an 1830 game is for a couple of the starting companies to buy a whole bunch of these cheap trains, run real hard, and make lots of money. And then the question is, can you save them? Do you want to? Can you hand them off? You know, what do you do with the remains of that company? This game reduces that as well. It takes away that option, which, you know, it may get boring, right? But, okay. So that's the one or more. Normally, though, you're allowed to buy as many trains as your corporation can afford and hold. You're also allowed to buy between companies. Okay. So you can buy from here the next train that's available. You can buy any trains that happen to be in the open market. It's possible, but unlikely, that trains end up in there. You can buy them from other major corporations, but you have to pay a positive amount of dollars. This is all public information. It's legal to do it in any phase of the game, including, you know, right from the beginning. You could buy a second train from another company. Why you would want, you know, why you would be able to do that, you know, what kind of player would make that kind of move, I don't know. But, okay. When a new number of train comes out, you've entered a phase change. And you have to look up and see what changes according to that phase. And we'll take a look at what those are. Okay. There's also a limit to the number of trains each major company can hold. This depends on the game phase. When the phase reduces this limit, if you have too many trains, you discard the excess into the open market. One of the only ways that can happen. If you own fewer than the maximum, you may purchase one, even if the purchase would cause a phase change, which would force you to throw a card away. However, if you already have the limit, you cannot buy another train. You can't sell trains to the bank. You can't discard them. The only way you can get rid of them is to persuade someone else to buy it or to cause it to rust. All right. If you have legal track that would connect two cities and allow you to make money, but you don't have a train, you must buy at least one train, unless there are none left in the initial offering or open market. Wow. Okay. That is an odd situation. I've never seen that in any game. A lot of them have an infinite number of trains of the biggest type. The cheapest available train in either the initial offering or open. Okay, so if you have the cash on hand to buy a train, you can buy whatever one you want, including from another company. However, if you don't have that cash on hand within the corporation, you will be forced to throw some of your own personal cash in to cover the difference. If you're throwing your personal cash in, you must buy the cheapest train available in either initial offering or open market. This can really suck. If there's some piece of shit that's about ready to rust in here, and somehow you're forced to buy that instead of, you know, whatever the brand new shiny thing is, that's a problem. Okay. You may only buy one train. You can combine only enough, you can contribute only enough cash for the purchase, which is to say the corporation will have no dollars left on it, which is a real problem because it needs a buck to buy a train from another company if you want to juggle stuff there. If the president doesn't have enough cash on hand, they have to sell stock. The normal rule for stock sales applies unless otherwise stated. In particular, the market value of each major company whose stock is sold is adjusted. You can only sell just enough shares to get the needed cash. You cannot make a sale that would cause a change of presidency of the currently operating company. I've seen some games that don't allow you to change any presidencies. Those are games where it's easier to win the game by going bankrupt. These sales are not considered a stock turn. It won't move the priority. The player is not required to bring himself into any kind of compliance with the certificate limit at this point. If he still can't raise the needed cash even after selling all his allowable stocks, he's bankrupt and the game ends immediately, and you calculate who's worth the most money. Wow. This is sitting at like full battery still, and that's kind of unbelievable. I wonder if this is reporting correctly. Okay. And we've already talked about purchasing private companies. That can happen anytime during the operating round. I am going to pause here because I need tea and a little bit of a rest. I may need another charger. I'm not going to go into all the specifics of laying a tile, but essentially I have covered, you know, you got to track back to one of your tokens. You have to maintain all existing track, pay the costs, stuff like that. Running the trains, okay. So in all the XX games, they kind of follow the same rules. There's sometimes a little bit of fuzziness. There's some differentiation in terms of them. In the case of this one, you're going to be running, hitting a number of towns, of cities. I believe, yeah, you must include at least one city or off-board location with a dot of the operating company. And then you can't hit any towns or cities more than once. That can sometimes be an issue. In this game, that'll be standard. So there are no split towns in this game. 1830 has that complexity where you can hit New York City twice. So that's not there. The station token. So each city has a little space, and a token could be there. If it's completely filled with tokens, it's blocked. You can run into that city, but you can't run through it. You can't go through the off-board locations. The total number of city and off-board locations is equal to or less than the train number type. So you could run a 2-train to one city and one other location, I guess. This is a little odd because I think the way this is worded, and I don't want to play this way, you could run a train here for 20 bucks without building any additional track. I don't buy into trains that go nowhere. That's not standard for XX. I don't see any prohibition to it. And the reason that there isn't one written in is because you could run from here to, say, Durango, And you'd only be running a one point of your train doing that. And I'm just not seeing anything. It has to connect. Oh, no. It has to connect 2 or more cities, towns, and or off-board locations. Okay, good. So you can run from a city to a town, and you wouldn't be using all your train capacity, but that's fine. You calculate your income by counting up the values of the cities and or towns that your train runs into or through. You are allowed to run multiple trains to the same cities. They can't share any track, though. And this is all very standard. You calculate out your income, and you decide whether or not to, you follow whatever rules there are. So if it's a public corporation, you decide whether or not to pay out. If it's a minor, you split the money. The 4D train is special. It generates double revenue for each city or off-board location, but not towns. But remember, towns don't count against you, so you want to hit as many of them as you can. Okay, some historical events. The National Railway, the NDM, is a group of several railways built separately. Since the NDM did not form historically until earlier railroads began to fail, it may not be floated in the first stock round. The player who buys the M&R private company from the initial offering receives the president's certificate of the NDM and must set its par value, probably as high as they can, to make their stock worth more. But no player is allowed to buy any further shares of the NDM until phase 3.5. 3.5, there's a reminder card in here somewhere that tells you after 5 of the 3 trains have been bought, there's like 1 more left, that the NDM can start, essentially. Each minor company's owner is given stock certificate of the corresponding major company from the trade-in shares as listed on the minor's company charter. So each of these are going to give you something. So this gives you 5% of the MDM. Do I have all these in here? Yeah. This gives you the UDY, and this gives you a 5% share of the MDN. What is this additional 10%? I don't know. Something comes with it. It's not the presidency. I don't see it. I'm a little bothered now. I'm going to have to look through the NDM shares. That's for failed companies. That's going to be the merger rules, which we'll get to very shortly. Okay. The minor company's station tokens will be removed from play for the remainder of the game, but they're not automatically replaced by stations of the corresponding majors. This is different from most games that have minors, where they get folded in and you actually get the token there. The money in each minor's treasury is transferred to the major company's charter. Whether or not the major company is floated, then the minor company's charters with their built-in 2 trains are removed from play. Okay. So, one of the minors folds into the UDY, 2 of them fold into the NDM. Okay. In addition, the NDM merger can occur only upon the first purchase of a 5 train in the game. When this is purchased, if the NDM has not floated, there is no merger. If there is, though, beginning with the player to the left of the president of the person who purchased the first 5 train, which is kind of a random choice, each player in clockwise order, except the president of the NDM, is offered a chance to voluntarily merge one of his eligible major companies into the NDM. Only these major companies are eligible to merge: the CHI, the MC, the MEX, the SPAM, and the UDY. Any company on this list which has floated may merge, even if it's not yet operated. At most, 1 company can merge into the NDM, so if anyone agrees, skip ahead. Okay, so this is kind of interesting. Player order is going to affect who gets the right to save their company by throwing it into the NDM. Other games that have a national railway, in particular, I'm thinking here 1856. Oh wow, I didn't have to hit my button. Are it tend to allow everyone who's got kind of a failing company to get a chance to dump it into the national railway. It doesn't tend to be a great plan for winning the game, but sometimes it can save your ass, and hopefully you've made, or if you've been wise, you've made a hell of a lot of money before you do it, but it generally cuts your revenue so much in other games. But in this one, let's see how it works. The president of the NDM is never allowed to merge another major company whose president's certificate he owns into the NDM, so he'll be skipped. If no one agrees to merge a company into the NDM in Step B, the president of the NDM must choose an unfloated eligible major whose president's certificate he does not own and merge it into the NDM. If possible, he must choose one whose president's certificate is still in the initial offering. I don't know how likely that is. Most of these games tend to have a rush to get the corporations because getting them started early, first of all, there's an advantage to holding president certificates because they don't count against your cert limit, but also you get more time to kind of build the track out and everything. However, sometimes there's magical times when you want to start a company. If there's no eligible unfloated major company, there's no merger. You skip ahead. If a player owns the president's certificate of the unfloated company, it does not entitle him to veto the merger in any way. If the president's certificate of the major company that is merging into the NDM is owned by a player, that player must discard the president's certificate, but is given a 10% share of the NDM stock from the trade-in box. That was the extra 10 that I found. This may cause a change in the presidency of the NDM. If it does, you hand it over immediately before continuing. If the president's certificate of the merging company is in the initial offering, the 10% share goes into the NDM box of the initial offering, i.e. it's available for purchase. All players who hold stock in the merging company, whether or not it floated, must sell it to the bank for half the market value. If its market value is odd, round up the total amount paid to each player who holds an odd number of shares. This is painful. This is the kind of thing that happens in 1856 as well, where you're basically losing half your value by merging usually. And it's pretty common. The president's share of the merging company is in the initial offering. The stock is worth 0, as stated before. That's only really an issue because there's some of these additional share, I think only for the Chihuahua, there's an additional share kicking around. Somebody could be holding it. It's worthless. It's just paper. The normal rules for stock sales do not apply. These are not considered stock turns. The market value of the merging company does not change. The priority deal doesn't move. No one's required to sell other shares. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. The home station of the merging company is removed from the map and replaced with one of the NDM's exchange tokens. Let's see what this looks like. That's these. So I've got 4 tokens base. Okay, so there's 3 tokens for handling the mechanical stuff on the board. 4 base tokens otherwise, and then 2 exchange tokens. This is interesting. Why are there 2? Let's keep seeing. If the merging company never operated, place the NDM exchange token in a space reserved for the merging company. Do not place an exchange token if the NDM already has a station in that hex. If the merging company has any other stations on the map in places where the NDM does not have stations, the NDM must replace them with its other exchange token. Ah, this is why. So, yeah. And let's take a look at what companies are allowed. So, the Chihuahua. Well, this has lots of tokens. Okay. My thought was that they were all 2-token companies. They're not. Okay. Other stations. Replace one of them. Yeah, you only get to choose one. The NDM president gets to choose. These exchanges do not cost the NDM any money. If any exchange tokens are unused, they become additional $80 tokens that could be purchased. But the NDM probably wants to get an exchange if it can. All money and trains of the merging company are transferred to the NDM. If this transfer will cause the NDM to own more than 3 trains, which is the limit by the phase of the game. We'll get to the phases in a bit. It still occurs, but the NDM has to discard down to 3 trains into the open market. Remove all the resources, charter shares, tokens. That company's gone. If there's no merger, the 10% share of the NDM goes from the trade-in into the initial offering, and the 2 exchange tokens are removed from play. So it will have less tokens. It'll be a smaller company if it doesn't merge, which works. Also, if there's no merger, the total number of certificates a player can hold is 1 higher. Okay. The game can end in 3 ways. One is when the bank runs out of cash. Remember, these aren't in there. So when that $9,000 is out of the bank and in players' hands, at that moment, the game has hit an ending. However, you get to complete that round, a single operating round, and then determine the scoring. If the bank runs out of cash during the stock round, there will be an addition. The stock round continues, and then there will be one more complete operating round. And when that happens, I throw additional money in, so this stuff becomes real, and we start using it. If any company's market value reaches the $200 a share, where it says game over, to remind you, you improvise additional cash and complete the current stock round, current operating round, or one more operating round if this somehow happens during a stock round. I think the only way it can happen during a stock round is if the price goes up because of being sold out. Now, I did not mention those things, did I? How the thing moves, how this moves. So I'm going to have to find those to make sure, because I didn't hit them. So I know what they are. They're the standard, but I'm going to just make absolutely certain. So end of a stock round, if 100% of the stock in any major company is owned by the players, that major company's market value moves up 1 row. If it's already at the top, it does not move any further. When you pay out dividends, it moves to the right 1 space. When you withhold dividends and put all the money into the company treasury, it goes to the left 1 space. Also, as a reminder, although I've already mentioned this, when you sell shares, each share sold drops at a space. And remember, the yellow area doesn't count against your certificate limit. You're still only allowed 60% though, so it's not as flexible as 1830 there. It doesn't give you that fun stuff. I don't know, it's kind of weird. It's like, yeah, I'm half assuming you know XX and half not. I've gone over stuff that I shouldn't have to, but I'm being a little light on a lot of stuff. Okay. The third way the game can end is if a player goes bankrupt. This ends the game immediately. You don't run any more rails or anything, so some companies don't get a run. It is still possible for a bankruptcy to happen if the game is scheduled to end at the end of an operating round or something, and then the game ends immediately. Okay, the winner is going to be the person with the most cash, plus current stock value, plus par value of any minors or privates they hold, which, unless something weird happens, they probably won't. The game would have to end pretty early for that to happen. Okay. This is telling you how to use this. Basically, this tracks how many operating rounds are left, and there's just different ways of doing it. There are 4 optional rules to the game. I'm not going to play with any of these. One is to allow each major company the option to lay 3 yellow tiles instead of 2 on its very first turn to help push the game out faster. They say this could have significant effects on the value of companies. I don't think it's a good idea. Allow a major company to purchase the KCM&O private from the player before Phase 3. That's this one. For no more than $40. This makes the pack and the CHI more attractive, but is less historically accurate. No. You know, although it may make the game more interesting as a whole. The minor companies are not closed in exchange for trade-ins immediately upon the train purchase that begins on Phase 3.5. Instead, they continue to operate until the beginning of the next stock round, and the exchange takes place then. This may cause the miners to still be in play when Phase 4 begins. Their 2 trains then continue to operate, even though 2s wouldn't operate. I see no reason to add that. And then getting rid of the delayed obsolescence. That's going to make the game a little harsher. I want to play it how it's designed. You know, what it was intended to be. Although, probably I favor games where the train wrecks happen. They give some hints here. In playtesting, some players start companies close to miners they own to optimize them. Yeah. The CHI seems always to start first in the stock phase because it's got an extra share out there. That's like the pen in 1830. It's a shitty company to start. I know some people say whoever owns the most pen at the end of the game wins. I've heard that claimed. Never seems to be the case. My rule of thumb in 1830 is whoever's the second owner of the B&O wins. And if somebody holds it all the way through, it's undeterminable. Although they probably do win, but they may have misused it. Expect Mexico City to fill up with tokens quickly. It has a strong income late in the game and is positioned to serve the most profitable Merida red area over here. Yeah. Unfortunately, each Mexico City upgrade costs money to play. So what you'll notice is there's yellow track to begin with. It costs 60 to put this down. Then it costs 40 to put the brown down. There's also only one gray upgrade, just to keep in mind. Let's keep looking. The last rounds of playtesting indicated players who could merge weaker railroads into the NDM have chosen not to do so. Yeah, no shit. You lose half your stock value on it. The only reason you would do so is if you are going to go into collapse. This has led to weaker positions for the NDM, and players have hurt their positions when they have to contribute money out of hand to permanent trains. Yeah, it had better be a lot. The decision whether or not to merge will be important in the 5-player games, particularly since several players may have weak eligible railways. Yeah, it's still green. I don't believe that this is tracking the battery. It was before, though, so I don't know. If you have an opportunity to operate 2 railroads, one strategy is to pay dividends every time with one while withholding frequently with the other. And then move trains around. Yeah, the big advantage to that is you'll be able to dump something into the yellow. It doesn't count against your cert limit, and you'll have more certificates in the end. Standard feeder railway. Okay. All right. Let's take a look at all the special stuff that's spelled out in these charts. Usually this is in the rules as well as in some kind of chart. Okay. Phases of the train. Phase 1, there are no 1 trains. Only yellow tracks are available. Yeah, I'm a little weirded out by this. There should be no Phase 1. There's no 1 trains. Only yellow trials. Major companies may not yet buy private companies. Each major company may own up to 3 trains and may only buy 1 train from the bank each turn. Majors may also buy from other major companies, though, which do not count against the 1 per turn. Red off-board areas are worth the lower of the 2 values. Players may not yet buy stock of the National Railway. And there's 1 operating round between each stock round. Phase 2 is when the first 2 train is bought for $100. Doesn't change anything. Phase 3 is first train $180. They tell you how many of each train there is. Green tiles become available. Okay, so you can only play yellow until Phase 3. This is standard stuff, but I feel like again, maybe. Major companies may buy private companies, except the MNR. MNR is the Mexican National, comes with the presidency, yeah. From players between half and 1.5 times. Beginning the next stock round, 2 operating rounds follow each stock round. So you'll be running the trains more often in between decisions on the stocks. It's kind of weird because early in the game, yeah, you really, sometimes you might need a few extra bucks to get your company started or something. But for the most part, it kind of doesn't matter that there's only one per. You're probably not doing much with your money on those stock rounds on the first couple. At least that's my impression from most. All right, 3.5. When 5 of the 6 3 trains have been purchased, all minor companies close, their presidents get trade-in shares, and players can start buying the NDM at this point. And the NDM is allowed to own up to 4 trains. You're only allowed up to 3 trains. Yeah. Okay, so that keeps people from sucking down all the 2 trains early as well as the only buying 1 train per turn. Again, trying to make it less harsh, I think. When the first 4 comes out, which is soon after, all 2s are removed from play. Each major company may own no more than 2 trains. No, may own no more than 2 trains, except the NDM, which is allowed 3. Major companies can buy multiple trains from the bank per turn. Yeah, but not very many. First 5 train comes out, all private companies close. The NDM merger can occur. Brown tiles become available. Red offboard areas become worth more. And on the next stock round, it's 3 operating rounds per stock round. First 6 train, all 3 trains are removed from play. When both 6 trains have been purchased, but before the 4D is purchased, all the 4 trains become obsolete. They have 1 more run. And then you hit the 4D and the gray tile becomes available. Now, what am I missing here? There's something that I expect to see in this area that I'm not seeing. I've got the size of the train, the number of trains, the cost, effects as to the pricing and the colors. There's something missing. And I don't know what it is. Something I expect. Oh, you know what? Okay, so each of the train cards tells you what is rusted. I would have liked another column telling you what rusts that train. But that's a little complicated because of the obsolescence. Okay, what about the privates? Mexico City, Acapulco. Nothing special about it. It's just some money. All right, the Kansas City, Mexico, and Orient. Only a major company that owns the KCM&O may lay the Copper Canyon special tile. That's that weird gold thing there. Now, I don't know where that goes, so let's keep looking. The tile can only be laid in Copper Canyon hex, F5. Something on the ground there. Oh, it's going to be... I don't know. There it is, for 120 bucks. It need not be connected to an addition station token. It does count towards the major company's normal limit of 2 yellow tile lays per turn. Even though it's not really yellow, it's gold. It does not count towards the normal limit of... Oh no, it does not count. But it still must be laid during tile laying. Okay. The company must pay a reduced terrain cost of $60 instead of the $120 to lay that tile. It does not close the KCM&O. The Copper Canyon tile is permanent. It can never be upgraded. Like any other tile once played, any company that connects to it can run there. It adds a town, a 20-buck town. That's kind of neat. If any other tile is laid there, or if the Copper Canyon tile has not been laid before the first 5 train is purchased, it can't be put down. The Interoceanic Railroad. That's this thing. It's a minor company, begins in Tampico. up here. Oh, yeah, I got the ABCD. And when phase 3.5 begins, it closes, but there's a trade-in certificate. Sonora, Baja California, same thing, except it's in a different space, and it's also NDM. The Southeastern, this begins in Osaka. It closes and turns into a UDY. The UDY share has no value and cannot be sold unless someone has set a market value by purchasing the presidency. Does not count towards the 50% required to float. The railways until the minor company closes. Yeah. But the company closes and you get your trade-in certificate. So this is... These certificates don't count to float a company, which isn't too important for the Mexican national because nobody can buy any, I guess. No, they can. Yeah. Does it even say that? It doesn't say that. Mexican International. The initial purchase of the Mexican International gets a 10% share of the Chihuahua. And this has no value and cannot be sold until it's set. This share does count towards the 50% required. Okay, so this is like the pen in 1830. Now all I need to do. Oh, it only takes 50% to float too. So does that change? Is that different? Yeah, that's different. In 1830, in a lot of the games, it's 60% to float. If I'm right, I don't know. That's what I think. Now I got to calculate. My memory serves me correctly. It's 60% to float in 1830. So that's a little different too. Okay. And then the Mexican National Railway, that's this thing. That'll come with the presidency, which I should probably put there. Let's put this back here. Gives you the 20% for free. You set the par value. But no one's allowed to buy any of it, and it can't be floated, it can't be sold until phase 3.5. However, it does count towards the amount required to float. And unlike other private companies, the MNR cannot be sold to a major company. So it's kind of like the B&O, except it's shitified, right? Yeah, so it's the B&O, but the B&O is awesome. It doesn't get to start, which means until, later in the game. Also, you're not able to buy up all the 2 trains, so that isn't going to be an issue. We have a compendium of all the different tracks and what they upgrade to. Quick appendix to give you all the specifics in here. Of differences. A couple of examples. Calculation of mail. Yeah. So it's the current value of the city because some of these cities don't have a current value. Yeah. Okay. And then they explain the merger decisions there. Then there's kind of a neat little historical, which made me happy to read. I'm always pleased with that. And a copy of the map on the back of the rule book. Always a useful thing. Might be worth photocopying and getting a nice color copy. For a couple more copies of it to pass around, because sometimes it's hard to see, what's going on when all the tracks on the board. This is a habit the Mayfair ones started doing, and more and more of the games are beginning to follow that more and more. A lot of the older ones didn't. All right, that's that. We are going to finish setup and then start. I do sort of a randomization on the bidding because I don't know what the fuck anything's worth in this. I'm pretty sure the minors are not, the privates are not worth what they are in 1830 because I can only sell them for 1.5 times. In general, minors tend to be pretty good, but here they're limited to only a 2 train. So they're probably not going to make the kind of money that they do in an 1835 or a 2038. Other games have them as well, but those are the 2 I'm most familiar with them. So I'm a little less convinced that like I want to bid as high as I normally do. All right, let's send this up, and I don't know if we'll get started tonight. It's well, this morning, but